How about we animate that?
Hi, and welcome to How About We Animate That, the show where I bring things to life through stop-motion animation. I'm your host, David Pagano, and on today's episode, I'm going to be animating this. This is a Transformers Masterpiece Collection Bumblebee figure. The box says Bumble, but that's just pretense. We all know that this is Bumblebee, and this is the Bumblebee of my childhood, the 1980s cartoon version. I just saw the new Bumblebee film, and I was delighted to enjoy myself at a Transformers movie. I cared about characters, I cared about what was going on, I could tell what was going on. I didn't feel like the people making the film were embarrassed to be making the film. I have a lot of strong feelings about Transformers. And I left the theater with a really positive, strong connection to the Bumblebee character. I wanted to try animating the character myself, and so here I am. How about we animate that? So this may be obvious, but the first thing that I've always done when I get a Transformers product is to figure out how to transform it. As far as animation is concerned, not only does transforming it help me figure out kind of the rig of the character, but it also tells me kind of how I can go about animating it, what I can do with it, and what sorts of possibilities there are in terms of a little bit of animation. I know I want to animate an outdoor scene, so I've put up this dark blue background. A lot of the stuff that I've done in the past where it's outdoors is typically daytime, but I find it really hard to match sunlight easily. And plus I think this dark blue contrasts with the color of Bumblebee really well. So I've transformed Bumblebee back and forth from robot to car a couple of times just to get a sense of how the transformation works and so that I can do it without looking at the directions. I think the way I'm going to have Bumblebee kind of drive down the road is to pull a classic play from my library of things that I constantly fall back on. In this case, it's the parallax scrolling drive down the roadway technique that I've used in a whole bunch of videos and even talked about it in the Lego animation book. What exactly do I mean by parallax scrolling though? It's a 2D animation technique where you kind of fake depth. It shows up in a lot of video games and things like that, but basically what it means is I'm going to be moving this roadway at a certain speed. You can see that it slides. So I'll maybe move that 4 studs per frame. And then this next kind of panel that's just these thin base plates with the trees on them, then you can see the trees are smaller. Those will move at probably 2 studs per frame. So the further back into space you go, the slower things move. It makes it feel like there's a much greater depth in terms of the set than there actually is. Typically with a parallax background, I'll have 5 layers maybe. But in this case, I'm just trying to keep the animation pretty simple. My plan is for Bumblebee to start out in robot mode, I think kind of running down the street so that I can have the parallax already going. And then he's going to kind of dynamically transform into the car mode as the shot keeps moving. Just doing some run pose tests before I start the actual animation. Sometimes with characters that have dark body parts like these legs here, you can kind of get lost in terms of the poses. So I've never actually used one of these helping hands before, and I don't typically do that on Lego projects because the studs hold things in place. But with this Bumblebee figure, I feel like it's really necessary to get him into these kind of dynamic poses that I want for the run. It'll remain to be seen whether I actually bother to mask out the support in each frame, but one thing at a time. What that means, of course, is that I've got to go into Dragon and add an extra exposure. That's where I'll have the empty background frames for each frame of the animation so that I can remove this thing later if I want to. I've basically just gone straight into the animation without completing a full test. I figured if I'm going to do this run anyway, I might as well just do it, and in case it works out really well, then I'll have the run completed already. The approach that I've kind of landed on for Bumblebee's run cycle is actually a 6-frame cycle. So it starts with him in this kind of mid-run pose with his one arm in front and the other arm in the back, and the foot is kind of going to be a little bit lifted off the ground, so if this is the ground it would be like that. Then the next frame after that, the foot plants, so it connects with the ground fully, and the other foot goes up, and the arms kind of go back even further. And this whole time he's also like kind of leaning forward, and his body is turned at a kind of 45-degree angle. So those are the first 2 frames. And then the mid frame is the thing I've been kind of struggling with. That's where the leg kind of needs to cross over. It's kind of like an in-between, and then it just continues a mirror image of that from the other side. So the arm will go out, and this arm will come forward, and so forth. You know, I've been animating Lego minifigures for 20 years, but every time I do something that's a new kind of rig, I kind of have to start from scratch a little bit. And especially when there's more articulation in the figure, I need to figure out what moves and what doesn't, what kind of poses are even possible. So that's what I've had to do with Bumblebee here. And for reference, I also looked at my copy of Transformers Devastation to see how the designers of this game figured out Bumblebee's run. And having some kind of reference material is always helpful. There are a lot of things to juggle in any parallax shot, and so what I do is I move all of the pieces in order. This, then I animate the figure, then I take a picture, then I remove the figure and the support, I take a picture of the empty background, and then I do it all over again. And that order is really important because if I do one of those steps out of order, I find it really easy to lose my place and kind of lose the rhythm of the scene. One thing that I'll often do with these parallax shots is to throw a big tree like this in the foreground right in front of the camera lens. And I only have it on screen for about maybe 2 frames at most, but it makes it look like there's a tree really close to the camera. It kind of adds a little bit more of that illusion of depth and making it feel like this world is much bigger than it actually is. I'm still working to try to perfect this in-between pose. If it doesn't show up right, it kind of gives the impression that his feet are just kind of swapping places every 4 frames or every 6 frames, and that's not what I want. Alright, so I wanted to get to frame 24 before I started the transformation sequence, and that's where I'm at. Because of the way he's kind of running, I think he's gonna flip over and become the car and then just continue rolling down the highway. Part of the reason I wanted to have Bumblebee run at the beginning of the shot is that I wanted him to have momentum to build up to the driving sequence so that he's kind of going the same speed the whole time. And 2 seconds seemed like enough time to kind of establish the fact that this was a character, it was running, and then the audience has the ability to absorb that before a transformation occurs, which is kind of a more abstract thing to see. Alright, now things are getting interesting because this is the mid-transformation where I kind of have to make things up as I go. And so what I'm doing is kind of having Bumblebee kind of carry his weight forward, and he's sort of diving into this roll, and because of the weight of the character, I had to put a battery on the little support here so that he would stay aloft. And I also did little things like starting to pull the wheels out of the feet so that each frame a little bit of the transformation is happening. What's happening now is that I'm trying to get the car to kind of react to the fact that this transformation happened. And the way I'm doing that is the front bumper kind of gets stuck a little bit in the flip, and then it has to kind of decelerate a bit, and then after it kind of settles to a normal car position, it will accelerate again and take off down the road. Now that the car is back on the ground, I'm turning off the second exposure because I don't need to support it with anything anymore. And that will also make this go a lot faster because I don't have to take 2 pictures for every frame. Yet another reason this gets easier when the car is on the ground is because I can just hold the car in place and move the plates 4 studs underneath. And then the animation gets really fast when the car is completely off screen and all I'm animating is the backdrop. Of course, I was going so quickly that I didn't pay attention to what I was doing, and part of the tree area actually fell off the table. So I think that's probably as good a place to end this as any. Let's go check out the final animation. Animation is complete, and let's take a look at the final animation of Bumblebee. So what you're seeing right now is the final animation with the helping hand support still in it. I was delighted to finally get to use this thing because it's been on my table and I feel like I'm lying to you by not having used it in a couple of other episodes it's appeared in. But finally, it was useful. You might even say it was helpful. I do like how this animation came out, but there's kind of like 3 separate parts to talk about. The first part is obviously the run cycle, and it's a little bit dodgy. It kind of looks like he's doing like cross-country skiing to me in some parts. It's a little slidey, and I definitely screwed up and did one leg 3 times in a row, but didn't realize it until I was just watching it now. Even though I had a plan for what I wanted the run to be and what I thought would work well, I sort of changed that plan like 3 or 4 times throughout the course of the animation. And again, I did take 2 exposures for every frame of the running animation, so now we can look at the animation without the support in it. I think this is a lot clearer in terms of like the visual of it. The filmmaker in me wants to present the most clear, clean, finished product, so that's why I did want to do a version where I masked out that support. I do really love how the transformation part came out. I feel like I can almost hear the sound in my head. You know, the Bumblebee in the movie was a very emotional character, and that was one of the reasons I connected with it. But to do a shot from scratch with just an unfamiliar rig, you kind of always have to start with something simple, and a walk or a run can tell you a lot about a character. I think having done this shot, even though it's kind of rough, I did learn enough that if I was gonna make a short stop motion film about Bumblebee, that would have been the perfect test, because it told me all I needed to know about how the rig works, how the transformation works. It would have really gotten me into the groove and set the tone for a stop motion film like that. By the way, Hasbro, if anyone there wants to hire me to make a Bumblebee or any other Transformer character stop motion film, I am available and interested. So that was the Masterpiece Bumblebee animation. If there's something else you'd like to see me animate, you can leave a comment on this video or use the contact page at paganomation.com, and I can confirm that that contact page will work for any Hasbro email address. If you like what we do and you want to see some behind the scenes stuff, photos, me rambling about the things that we make, all kinds of other goodies, you can support us on Patreon over at patreon.com/paganomation. And so, having found that I do indeed have both the touch and the power, we're going to call it a day here, but I'll see you next time for another How About We Animate That.